In this lesson, we'll take a look at some additional terms that are important to the study of public relations. As with Lesson 1, in some cases you'll see that the definitions may vary, and even to the point where different definitions may actually conflict with each other. Again, remember that I'm not looking for you to repeat these definitions word for word or to memorize them as if you need to know them for a test. Rather, we're simply laying the foundation for the study of public relations with a good general understanding of these concepts. In Lesson 1, we talked about publics and stakeholders. These terms are examples of what I talked about just a moment ago, in that the terms can have very different interpretations and in some cases even be viewed as contradictory. Your readings this week offer a definition by Grunig, and I think it's a good one. Read this section closely, as I think it gives you a good understanding of stakeholders and publics. But remember that the most important thing is that if and when you are ever talking about stakeholders or publics, it will probably be a good idea for you to define those terms so that your audience will understand exactly what you mean, given the fact that there is oftentimes variation in these definitions. In public relations, we talk a lot about owned media, paid media, and earned media. These terms are different and actually can help us also understand the difference between advertising and public relations. So let's look at each of these terms. Owned media refers to those media channels that an organization owns itself. These channels can be used by the organization to communicate with its publics. Because the organization owns these channels, they don't have to pay to broadcast or publish its messages, and they can also control the messaging. Examples of owned media include a company-owned website as well as company social media sites. Now, some of you may question whether or not social media sites really are owned media because the organization doesn't actually own Facebook or YouTube, for example. It's true that an organization doesn't own the network itself, but they do have a lot of control over their own account or their own page on that network. While they are subject to terms and conditions of that specific network, these terms and conditions aren't overly restrictive, so we consider them to be company-owned pages and therefore owned media. When organizations utilize paid media, they are paying another media property for the right to distribute its message. Think about paying for time to air a commercial on TV, place an ad on a website, or rent a billboard for a certain amount of time. In these cases, the organization has a lot of control over the message, including generally the content, the timing, and the placement. On the other hand, organizations will often develop messaging for its publics that are sent to media properties with the hope, but no guarantee, that the message will be carried by the media outlet. This is considered to be earned media. Because there is no charge to the organization, they have really no control over if, how, or when that message will be published. Think about a press release. A news organization may run the release virtually word for word, may just use bits and pieces of it as a separate article or part of a larger article, or may ignore the press release entirely. Now, even though earned media is not paid for, it would be incorrect to say that this is free media, as some people do. It's really not free media because there are still some internal costs associated with providing or developing the message, as well as building the necessary relationships with the different media outlets. Now, in Lesson 1, we pointed out that there are some differences between advertising and public relations. People have a lot of different perspectives on this as well, but generally, you can view the differences between public relations and advertising as similar to the differences between earned media and paid media. Generally, public relations is focused on earned media and trying to get its messaging out through media channels without paying for them. On the other hand, advertising does just that. Advertising is focused with developing those promotional materials and those promotional messages that actually will be carried by other media outlets, but at a cost and at a price to the original organization. Finally, while publicity and public relations are sometimes used interchangeably, there are some important distinctions here as well. While public relations is considered to include messages that are prepared by an organization for its benefit, publicity can include word-of-mouth messaging from other organizations or individuals as well. These messages are not always favorable to the organization, and in fact may not always be true. One irony about publicity is that even though publicity is often inaccurate, the public generally views publicity as highly credible because the source, rightly or wrongly, is considered to be impartial and unbiased. A great example of public relations versus publicity: a feature story about football superstar and hero O.J. Simpson, along with his wife giving birth to their daughter, would be considered a good example of public relations. On the other hand, what a difference a few years would make when all kinds of publicity fell to O.J. Simpson, way beyond his control, oftentimes inaccurate, and almost always putting him in a negative light.